I moved to Wisconsin. I know, whoop, Wisconsin folks. A number of years ago, I've moved away since then, so I don't live in Wisconsin, but I moved there in kind of the mid-2000s, and I was associate pastoring at a church in Green Bay. Can I say that here? I have to be careful. I might get, I won't say it. I'll leave it. No, I'll say it. Go Pack. Come on. Anyway, I was, I think it was within my first couple weeks at the church, first maybe 2, 3, maybe month at the church. I was kind of meeting some people, getting to know the staff there. And I had a friend, one of the youth pastor actually, of the church, at the church, and he called me up one day. I was in my office, and I got a call, and he said, Dan, I've got an opportunity for you. I said, ooh, an opportunity. What is this? And he said, I had a gift for my brother. His brother also lived in town. He's like, I bought a gift for my brother. It was an experience, but my brother can't go, and so I want to invite you, if you'd like to join me in an experience. I'm like, well, what experience is it? I don't know if he actually asked it that way, but there was a little mystery in there, and I said, well, what's the experience? And he says, I'm going to go skydiving tomorrow, and I'd like to know if you want to come. I've got 2, seats on this plane or whatever. They weren't actually seats. You sat on the bottom of the plane with no seats. But I've got 2 tickets or whatever to go skydiving, and my brother can't go, and I need someone to use them. Would you be interested? And that was kind of been like one of those like bucket list dreams for me. Like, how cool would that be to go skydiving? And so I said, yeah, like I'd love to. I'd love to go skydiving. And so I called up my brother who lived in Oregon, and I said, hey, guess what? He's like, what? I'm going skydiving tomorrow. It's like, no way, that's awesome. And I think I called my parents, and I called, my other brother, or messaged him, I'm going skydiving tomorrow. I told my wife, she's like, you're what? Going skydiving tomorrow. And so we kind of had this all planned out, and my wife, there's a couple different ways you can go skydiving if you're like a new skydiver. And one is you go tandem with somebody. I'd be interested, how many people have skydived in here? Okay, quite a few of you guys. So there's one is you go tandem with somebody. So you get on a plane with somebody and you're like strapped to them and you jump out and you free fall, and then they make sure you know when to pull the parachute and stuff like that. And if something goes wrong, they can at least die with you. So I'm just like, this is horrible. Like if something goes wrong, 2 people die, not 1. No, they're supposed to they know what they're doing. The other one is called a tagline or something like that, and you actually go up by yourself and you jump out of the plane yourself, but the ripcord to your parachute is actually attached to the plane. So you don't really have the same free fall as when you're going tandem. You have a little bit as the parachute's kind of getting, coming out, and then it kind of catches right away, and then you're by yourself. And so the skydiving that we were doing was the second of those 2, this tagline one. And it was interesting because I thought, oh, well, that's kind of, you don't get to free fall as far. But I actually found that it was a little bit the more kind of risky of the 2, because once you jump out of the plane, it's just you. You're all alone. And so we had to actually go, I think it was 4 hours of class for this skydive. And so we went to this place early. My wife and she had her 2 little kids, and she was planning to come, 4 hours later so that she could watch, which I'm like, okay, what is that supposed to, watch me plummet to the earth? Maybe you should just stay home and I'll tell you if it worked, or you'll hear if it didn't. So I go to this thing, 4-hour class, and they do a good job of scaring you. I mean, that was what, I felt like that's what the class was about, was trying to scare you to not do it. We sat down, they kind of talked through some things, and then they started showing videos of what could go wrong. If your parachute doesn't quite open up right, and if it gets all tangled. And so they're like, okay, if that happens, and first they showed some videos of people spiraling, and then they showed some things, and then they said, okay, if that happens, and you're like, you mean it could actually happen? They're like, I mean, it could, it probably won't. We're pretty sure that these were packed well. In fact, they kind of give a little plug. If you want to pack parachutes on your way out, we'll give you a discount next time you come. I'm like, so was my parachute packed by somebody who wanted a discount the next time? Because that sounds a little scary. So they're like, okay, if for some reason you jump out of the plane and it doesn't like pull you right away and you look up and you're spinning or something and you realize, okay, it didn't open right, they're like, you know, these got these cords, that go up to your parachute, and you like whip them like 3 or 4 times. And then you crisscross them, and then you whip them again, and you look up to see if anything happened, right? And if it's still tangled and you're spiraling out of control, then you whip them and you crisscross them and you whip them and you look up to see if anything happened. If you're still falling, if it's still tangled, then you pull your emergency chute. It will release that parachute. Hopefully it doesn't get tangled in your emergency chute, and your emergency chute will open up. And if that one has a problem and it's tangled and it's, then you whip them and you crisscross them and you whip them and you look up, and if it doesn't work, then, well, by that time, it doesn't matter actually. And I'm like, seriously? This is scary. And I remember, my brother would be like, hey, texting, hey, have you skydove yet? Skydive? Is it skydived or skydove? English guy. You don't even know, and you're an English teacher. Oh, that makes me feel so good. So he's like, have you skydived? I'm like, no, not yet. But I was so excited, and everybody knew I'm going skydiving. Took the class. We got our jumpsuit on. Didn't look, they're old school jumpsuits. And there was about 4 or 5 other people in this class, and we walk out onto the tarmac of this little airport, and there was like a Cessna, like a little tiny plane. And there was no door on this plane. Like it was just an opening. And I look in the plane, and there's no seats in this plane. And I'm like, seriously, that's what we're going up in? And I climb into this kind of, at that point I could have been like, you know what? I got 2 little tiny kids, maybe I'm not gonna skydive today. I saw the course, I know what I'm doing. I could probably tell people like, yeah, I know a lot about skydiving. But no, I couldn't do that, especially because the youth pastor friend's like, come on, Dan, let's go. So I climb into this rickety tin can of an airplane. I sit down on the floor of the airplane, like against the back. And I can't remember if there were like things you hooked your arms in or you strapped in. Because and then the plane takes off, and it's not like this nice, like kind of like gradual rise. They kind of took off and then start spiraling up, to gain altitude as fast as possible. And I'm looking out the open door of the airplane. I'm like, this is crazy. Like we're getting higher and higher. And we get up to the elevation that we're, gonna go, and the guy who's flying the plane, our instructor, he says to us, okay, when I point to you, you need to stand up. You need to, grab onto this thing. I think we were already hooked in or something like that. You're gonna walk to the edge of the door, put your hands up on this side, whatever it was. And he says, I'm gonna say 1, 2, 3, jump, and you need to jump. If you don't jump, I'm gonna say 1, 2, 3, jump, and you jump. If you don't jump, I'll say go sit down, and you just missed your chance. Like, dude, this guy's intense. Like, you don't let us just like stand there for a while, And so here I am, we're flying up, and they're like, okay, who wants to go first? And he's gonna just pick somebody, and I'm really hoping he picks like my youth pastor friend first. Because I'm like, if he jumps and it doesn't open, like, I'm guessing they kind of cancel the day. Like, I'm like, okay, that'll probably be it. So, if something bad happens, I'm sure. So my friend, he gets up there, 1, 2, 3, jump, no hesitation. He's gone. Oh, he's gone. And then he points at me. You just are like in like robot mode at that point. Okay, stand up. Walk out. You're standing on the edge of this door. I'm looking down, and I just see fields, like Wisconsin hay fields. And I'm thinking, what in the world am I doing? My daughter, my wife, and my 2 kids, my youngest wasn't even old enough to see it, but my next one would be pretty tragic. Pretty, I think it might mess her up for life if her dad, died today. And I'm like, this is crazy. Like, what? This is such a risk. Like, what am I doing? This is just for fun? It's not getting me anything. I'm like, what do I do? 1, 2, 3, jump. I jumped. It was so cool because I jumped out of that. I mean, I was freaked out. I jumped out of this airplane. I mean, I could have not. I could have said, you know what? It's not worth it. It's not worth it. I don't know what I was thinking. I'm going to go sit back down. Somebody might have said, my brother would have definitely made fun of me for the rest of my life. But, most people would be like, yeah, that was a wise decision, Dan. You're such a wise, young man, pastor, father. It's smart to sit down. I could have sat down. It'd be fine. Probably wouldn't change my life that much. But I couldn't say, I've skydove. Skydived. I couldn't say that I've done the skydiving thing. Like, I couldn't say that, right? Like, I could say I took the class. I could say I got in the plane. I could say I wore the jumpsuit. I could say I wore the backpack, the parachute. I could even say I got right up to the edge and the guy says 1, 2, 3, jump. And I could say, man, it was so awesome. And I could not tell you the rest of the story, and you'd be like, what happened? I jumped. And it was so cool because as soon as it's like windy and you're standing in there, you jump out of the plane and all of a sudden, it's calm. Because you're like with the wind. You're floating. And my parachute opened up. I didn't have to do any whipping back and forth and shaking. My parachute opened and I had these like earphones on and I could hear him say, all right, pull down on the right side. You're gonna spin around, circle around the area. And I'm like, it was so peaceful. And I remember floating down, and they're kind of talking me through. They're like, yeah, feel free to go back and forth a little bit, and just kind of gliding around. And I start to get to where I can see all the people down there. And like, oh, there's my wife and my kids. And it was sweet. I wanted to end our time with this story because, here we are, Torchbearers Conference, digging into the Word, talking about things like the God of the universe living in us. Talking about, this life that's like so different from anything we could imagine. This life that's not, so often we miss the heart of the gospel that Jesus died and rose again, as Sam was sharing in this last one, that we're not just a bucket of dry bones. We're not just bodies with meat and skin and sinews just sitting there. Like we have the breath of God breathed into our life to do his kind of work in this world. And it's really easy for me to hear that stuff, to get excited about that stuff, to talk about it, to be like, oh, it makes so much sense and this is so exciting. And then we stand there on the edge of the airplane of the Christian life and we don't jump. Like we don't go. And you can only do that so long before you start kind of questioning the whole thing. And before you start questioning, I don't even know if skydiving even works. I don't even know, because you've spent most of your life just standing there. And you can talk it up, and you can explain it all, and you've watched the videos, and you've heard the speakers, and you've seen other people jump. But so often we find ourselves just standing there, not willing to cross that threshold into the unknown. What I want to spend some time as we dig through the question that we're going to look at tonight is kind of asking, and I think this is one of the questions that comes up a lot of times with the students and comes up in my own heart, my own mind, and with our staff, and I think it's one of the most important questions we can ask as we're talking about what is Christ in us like, is like, how does it work, right? Like, how does that work? Like, what does that look like? Because we can talk about it, but talk is cheap. Talk is cheap. And the hard thing, because when people ask me about that, and I've had conversations, and it's like, okay, well, how does it work? It actually is really hard to explain outside of life. Like, how does it work? Well, I don't. Come jump with me. Here's a time when it's hard to explain. It's not a theoretical question. It's not theory. It's practical. And so I don't know if I'll answer your questions, but I just want to wrestle through that idea, because as we launch out tonight, I don't want this conference to just be theory. I don't want this conference to just be getting excited or reignited or reminded of this reality that we're not dry bones, we're breathed, that the breath of life is in us. I don't want that to stay theory. I want us to launch out of those doors. Like that airplane, and say, God, take me where you're going to take me. The passage we're going to look at is from Isaiah chapter 6. very well-known question from God. Isaiah chapter 6, and we're going to start in verse 1. Isaiah here is talking about really his calling into ministry. It's interesting because probably the first 5 chapters, he kind of begins these kind of woes. He's talking about all the nations around Israel, and then he begins talking about Israel and really how bad they've been and how God is coming, and he's going to kind of bring judgment on Israel, on these nations, and all these different things. And intentionally, he waits till chapter 6 to give his calling. Well, really, chapter 6 happens prior to chapters 1 through 5. But he kind of sets the stage of, hey, everybody's in trouble. Woe is you, nation, you, whatever. And he comes to chapter 6, and he's going to share his calling. He says, chapter 6, verse 1, in the year of King Uzziah's death, I saw the Lord sitting on a throne, lofty and exalted, and the train of his robe was filling the temple. And so we've got Isaiah, and he has this dream or vision of the Lord, God of the universe, sitting on a throne, and he's lofty, he's exalted, and like his robe is filling the temple. It says seraphim stood above him, each having 6 wings. With 2, they covered their faces. With 2, they covered his feet. And with 2, he flew. And I love this picture. So you've got these angelic beings with 6 wings, probably massive beings, and they're flying above the throne, and they've got wings. And I always thought if I could have a superpower, it'd be to fly. I mean, what a cool thing. I think God gave birds like the greatest gift of all creatures because they can fly. Like, you just watch like a bird flying. I mean, how awesome is that? I think, man, how cool would it be to fly, to have wings? And these creatures have 6 of them. But 4 of the 6 wings aren't even being used to fly. I think it's actually meant to show, God could have used something else to cover the eyes and covers the feet, but it actually uses wings, not even being used to fly, but used to cover what they see, their feet, kind of speaking of like how holy God is. It's this beautiful picture. And so here they are, and it says one of them calls out to the other and says, holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory. And it says when he calls that out, this angelic being, the seraphim, it says the foundations of the thresholds trembled at the voice of him who called out. So it was like an earthquake. These angelic beings' voices were so loud and so powerful. The earth shakes, the temple shakes, and it begins filling with smoke. It's like a Mount Sinai kind of imagery happening here. And that's where Moses met with God. And here Isaiah is, and he's like, oh my goodness, I'm in the presence of God. These creatures are calling out. The earth is shaking. Smoke is filling. And Isaiah realizes, I shouldn't be here. What am I doing? He says in verse 5, then I said, woe is me. It's interesting because he's been saying, woe is Israel, woe is Judah, woe is Moab, woe is all these other nations. And here he says, woe is me. I am ruined. It's over for me, he said. It's done. Because I'm a man of unclean lips and I live among a people of unclean lips. For my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts. I don't know if you've ever walked into a situation where you just don't know the cultural ethic of what you're supposed to do, and all of a sudden you realize that everybody else took their shoes off and you've got your muddy boots on, and you're like, oh, it's so embarrassing. Here he is, he's looking, he's watching, his feet are exposed, and he sees these angelic beings that are beautiful, that are holy, and they won't even let their eyes be seen. They're covering their eyes, they're covering their feet, and here's Isaiah, just kind of out in the middle of everybody. He's like, oh my goodness, what am I doing here? I'm dead. It's done. I've seen the King, the Lord of hosts, my eyes, and I'm a sinful person. It's over. You guys all probably know the story, verse 6. It says, then one of the seraphim flew to me with a burning coal in his hand. which he had taken from the altar with tongs, and he touched my mouth with it and said, behold, this has touched your lips, and your iniquity is taken away, and your sin is forgiven. As Isaiah is convinced his life is done because he's seen the God, the Lord of hosts, this powerful angelic being flies towards him with tongs and a coal and burns his lips. And often lips are representative of the whole body, the things we speak. Out of the heart, the mouth speaks. And he burns these lips, and the angel says, your lips have been burned. Behold, I've touched your lips. Your iniquity is taken away. It's gone. Your sin is forgiven. I mean, that would be so powerful if the story ended there. It would be amazing, right? Sin dealt with, iniquity taken away. Wow. It's like, man, that's awesome. Close the book. Or, man, that's awesome. Let's jump now to the cross and talk about Jesus taking away our iniquity and our sin on the cross. I mean, that right? Like, wow, that would be so awesome. That's such a great conclusion. But that's not the conclusion. It's actually the setup. That's not the end of the story. That's preparing for the story that's to come. This angel burns his lips and says, your iniquity is taken away, your sins forgiven. Verse 8, Isaiah says, then I heard the voice of the Lord. Here's the question, saying, whom shall I send, and who will go for us? Whom shall I send, and who will go for us? It's such an interesting thing. We talked about that at the very beginning, that these questions that God asks, I think, are intentionally to lead the witness, to lead his people. At least it doesn't talk about there being crowds of people around. And there's like 500 people, and he's like, hey, which one of you guys are going to go for us? All we know is that Isaiah's there. He's the only character that's brought into the picture. And it seems like in the heavenlies, the Lord is talking, whether that's to himself in the Trinity, whether that's to the angelic beings around him, and he says, whom shall I send? I need to send somebody. Who should I send? Who will be my messenger? Who will go for us? And as we've already talked about a few times, as we see Isaiah's response, we recognize that he understands and believes and lives in the reality that his lips have been burned and his iniquity is gone. He doesn't say in response to that, oh, Lord, I'd go, but remember me? I'm a man of unclean lips. I'm from a nation of unclean lips. He doesn't say that. He doesn't look back at his sin. He embraces actually what God has already done in taking away his iniquity. But as Isaiah, I can just imagine it's like this edge of the airplane kind of moment for Isaiah. God's like, who should I send? He was just on the ground. He thought he was gone. He thought he was dead. The angels come, burned his lips. Their sin is gone. And now hears God say, whom shall I send? And I can just imagine like this kind of like, I want to be used by God. I want to go. But do I actually say, send me? Because that's an unknown. Send me into the unknown. And he's standing on the edge of that kind of crevice of life. What is God going to do? And I love he responds. He says, here am I. Send me. So simple. Here am I. Send me. I'll be used. I'll be a part of your plan. Let me be a part of what you're doing here. Not just like, oh, Lord, thank you for burning my lips and cleansing me from my sin and my iniquity, but also I want to be a part of what you're doing. I'll go. Send me. Not just the cross and Jesus dying for us. That's not where the gospel ends, right? The gospel goes from the cross, cleansed, through the cross, through the death of Christ, for what reason? You know, the cross is not the goal. The cross was the means to reach the goal. The goal is that God would get back in humanity. Like God was meant to be in humanity. That was Adam and Eve in the garden. That was the idea. Remember, it's like the breath of life. God breathed into Adam and Eve the breath of life, and they became living beings. That was the goal. That was the intention in the garden. Adam and Eve, living beings, God in them, living in this harmony and this beauty as the God of the universe, indwelling his humanity. That's how the world was supposed to be, and it was broken at the fall. That's why God had to say, where are you? Where's your brother? And here they are, and Christ dies on the cross because there was this brokenness and this sin that had to be removed. Like Isaiah, I'm a sinful person, and God says, I've taken care of it because of Jesus. He died on the cross for you, like that burning coal on your lips, but that's not the end. That's so that I did that to prepare you for life, resurrection life. To use you, to have you a part of what I'm doing, to have my life in you. We were talking about this at one of the tables earlier, that so often we have great illustrations about the cross, don't we? One of the questions that was asked is like, how do you talk about like the resurrection life, the indwelling life of Christ to kids? Like how do you do that? Like how do you, because a lot of times we kind of wait on the Holy Spirit and Jesus' life in us until people are old enough and can understand it. And I think we actually do a real disservice when we do that. We have a lot of illustrations, a lot of creative ways of talking about Jesus' death for our sins, that he exchanged his life for our sins, and that he died on the cross and we've been cleaned, and a lot of things, and we leave it there. And the gospel doesn't stop there. That's like me coming into this plane and like, hey, I've got all the gear on, I've done everything, but I just won't actually step into the purpose for getting geared up, the purpose for taking the class, the purpose for putting on the parachute. What was the purpose of the cross? The purpose of the cross was to deal with sin. Why? So that man could once again be filled with the Spirit of God, the life of God. That was the purpose. And yet it's so easy to stop at the cross. We talk about, questions like, are you saved? We say, hey, are you saved? And what do we mean by that? And I think it's interesting because I think we mean something different than the way the Bible often talks about saved. And some of you guys have heard this illustration, but I like it. If I'm grilling, anybody like steaks in here? Okay, sorry, vegetarians. I love steak. Steak, it's so good. Like, another God's gifts to mankind, steak. It's like, oh. And so you're grilling a steak, and you've got it, and it's like a really nice, big, expensive, good steak. Tons of fat, because that's what tastes so good. And you're grilling a steak, and you've just been, perfectly grilling it, not too long, searing the outside. You get one side, you flip it over, you get the other side, and it is like, you can smell it, and it's just right. And so you say to your, brother or friend or whatever, hey, can you bring me one of those, styrofoam plates over here, because I need to get the steak off the grill real quick, because I don't want it to overcook. And so they come along with that styrofoam plate, and they're holding the styrofoam plate, and you take this steak, and it's huge, and you plop it on the styrofoam plate. What happens? Crack, plop, onto my deck. What are you gonna say? Absolutely. I would probably give it like a 2-minute rule even. But yeah, you're like, I can save that, right? Like I can save that. So what do? You grab that steak, you pick it up, you put it in a Ziploc, you throw it in the freezer, and you save it, right? You said you'd save it. No. When you say, I can save that, you don't mean you can save it, right? Like when you say save it, you don't mean, that'll go nicely in my freezer and I can save that for years. No, when you say I can save that, you mean I'm going to pick it up off the ground. I might dust it off a little bit. Maybe I'll just like kind of throw it on quick sear on both sides if I need to kill any germs. And I'm going to what? Eat it. Because that's why I picked it up. Romans 5:10 says this. Romans 5:10.
He says, for if while we were enemies with God, we were reconciled to God through the death of his son. All right? We were enemies with God, just like Isaiah up in the heavenlies. We were enemies with God. We've been reconciled to God by the death of his son, brought back into the relationship with God by the death of his son. That we had sin that was separating us from God, and when Christ died for us, he took away that sin so that we could once again have reconciled relationship with God. But that's not the end of the gospel. That's not where it stops. It says, for while we were enemies, we were reconciled to God through the death of his son, how much more, having been reconciled, now that we're reconciled, we shall be saved by his life. Saved by his life. It's like Sam was talking about that computer. You know, you can have the greatest computer, upgraded, all this stuff. That's awesome. Man, how much did you spend upgrading your computer? $5,000. Wow, that's an awesome computer. But if you don't plug it in, it's not useful. Saved by his life. I love this picture with Isaiah because you have both sides. He's cleansed, and after being cleansed and receiving the cleansing, God says, who can go for me? He's like, send me, I'll go. I'll be used. I'll step into that void. And it's scary. Matthew chapter 14, flip there with me. Matthew 14. I love Peter. Peter's such a great guy because he makes some pretty good blunders. He's fun to watch. I think the rest of the disciples probably liked Peter too, because Peter had a good way of kind of, doing things first. I bet there's a lot of mistakes. We probably would know some of the other guys better, like Thaddeus or, Bartholomew, but they never get a chance. Like, they're kind of smart. What is that? It's like a proverb, like the guy who keeps his mouth shut is like wise or seem wise. There's a bunch of proverbs that say that, like less words is better. So I think those guys hey, if we're quiet long enough, Peter's going to speak. Peter's going to make the mistakes, and we can kind of cruise by under the radar. And so here we have a story, and I love because Peter's got a unique role in this story. Chapter 14, they've just finished feeding the 5,000. 5,000 fed by Jesus, disciples there. Verse 22, it says, immediately he made the disciples get into the boat and go ahead of him to the other side while he went to send the crowds away. And so Jesus, they fed the 5,000. These people have come together, pretty awesome miracle, multiplying the bread, multiplying the fish. Wow, that's awesome. Jesus tells his disciples, hey, you guys get in the boat, head out. I'm going to send the crowds away. I'll meet up with you later. Verse 23, it says, after he sent the crowds away, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. Jesus did. And when it was evening, he was there all alone. Verse 24, but the boat was already a long distance from the land, battered by the waves, for the wind was contrary. Now, in Colorado, we don't have a lot of big lakes. Like, most of our lakes are quite small. Minnesota, you have some big lakes. You go up to the Great Lakes, some really big lakes. I mean, when you're in one of the Great Lakes, you pretty much feel like you're in the ocean. Like, you don't want to capsize in one of those, especially a long ways out there. And if you can imagine being in one of the Great Lakes and a huge storm comes and you've got a boat that doesn't have a motor, like, it's kind of scary. If somebody flips out of the boat, you're in trouble. I remember we had one of our Torchbearers schools had a sailboat ministry called Kingfisher Project. And they basically had this huge schooner, and the Bible school ran on the schooner. They don't have it anymore, which is tragic because I really wanted to do it at some point. Never got to. But they would teach, at the beginning of the course, as you're getting ready for Bible school, they have to teach you how to, sail a ship, sail a boat. How to pull up the masts and all this stuff. And one of the things they teach you is if somebody falls, because the wind comes, and sometimes this thing's like totally tipped up. It's a big deal. And you're in the Mediterranean, it's in Greece, and if you have a storm, there's no guarantee you're going to stay alive through Bible school. And so they kind of, one of the things they taught people is if somebody falls out of the boat, especially at night, but anytime really, somebody's primary job is to point at them. They point at where they saw them, because you're, like, let's say you've got the wind in your sails, you're moving. It's not gonna be easy to turn that boat around. And a lot of these boats have like a motor on the back too, so you can kind of put down the sails and then, kind of slowly move with the motor. It's a huge boat though, like bigger than, this room. And so somebody falls over, you point at them, and pretty soon the swell and everything else, you're not gonna see that person anymore. But as that boat begins to turn, that person kind of keeps their hands pointed to where you think they are. And that person's super important, because as you've turned around, it's not gonna be easy to find them. There's a good chance they're not gonna survive. That's with a motor. Can you imagine being on a little boat with no motor, you're being blown by the wind, somebody falls overboard in a storm, or you capsize, and you're like, that's it. And game over. And so they're here, it's a storm, it's crazy, it's windy, Jesus is watching from above. The wind is contrary. That doesn't sound very bad like that. I think different translations have it better. But the wind is contrary. Verse 25, and in the fourth watch of the night, he, Jesus, comes to them walking on the sea. Verse 26, when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified. I mean, they were already scared because they're in this storm. Now they're seeing a man walking towards him on the sea, and they're terrified. And they said to each other, it is a ghost. It's a spirit. And we kind of read that and we're like, yeah, that's funny. I think it's a ghost. This is in a world and a time where the spiritual world was very, a part of people's world, a part of people's thought process. This isn't like, America in 2024 where it's like, yeah, everybody knows there's no such thing as ghosts. Like, this is when, like, people always talked about spiritual things, and they think there's like some sort of ghost out there. They see it walking. They're already in the storm, and there's this ghost. And it's like, oh my goodness. And it says they cried out in fear. These are grown men. These are fishermen. These are like the burly men. And they're crying out in fear. It would have been fun to hear, actually. It says, but immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, take courage. It is I. Do not be afraid. And they hear it. I don't know how they could hear it over the storm, but here they are in the boat, and you can imagine these disciples, and they're freaked out, and they've been screaming like little girls, and they see this man. They think he's a ghost. He says, do not be afraid. It is I. And it's funny because you read this, and I'm going to read it slow because it's interesting to hear what he says. Peter says to him, Lord, if it's you, command me to come to you on the water. If it's you. Now, I don't know about you, but if I was Peter and I thought there was a ghost, and that ghost said to me, don't be afraid, it is I, and I'm not actually sure who it is, because it says, if it's you, so it kind of sounds like there's a little bit of a doubt. If I'm not sure and I'm Peter, there's some other lines that would come out of my mouth before, like, ask me to come out there. Like, how about, like, hey, can you do a miracle for me? Or they've already seen Jesus, calm the storm. That's happened already. How about, like, okay, if it's you, calm the storm. That would be a very logical thing in my mind for Peter to say. Jesus, if it's you, tell us all of our names and our birthdays backwards, in alphabetical order. There's a lot more logical things I would say. Here's Peter. He's standing on the edge, and I can just imagine the other disciples saying, hey, you be quiet. Peter's going to speak. Let him let him stick his foot in his mouth. And they kind of push him forward to the front of the boat. And he's like, what am I going to say? If it's you, tell me to come. And it's like, the evil spirit's like, ha, 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 Like, what if it is a ghost? Come to me. If he gets in the water, he's going to die, right? Like, they're not going to get him. There's no motorboat. There's no, like, hey, if you start sinking, just put that red flag up so that we can zip around and no other ski boats, hit you on the way. Like, this is it. If he falls in, he's dead. It's nighttime in a storm. And I love this because Peter, he's like on the edge of this boat. And he says, Lord, if it's you, command me to come to you on the water. And I just thought this is interesting. Why would he ask Jesus to command him to come? Why wouldn't he just say, if it's you, let me know so that I can come to you? Like, it seems like he actually wants Jesus to say, come. Come. If it's you, command me to come. And I think Peter knew that if Jesus commands me to come, then I'm okay. If it's Jesus who says, come, it's not my idea, it's not my agenda. If he tells me to come, then I'll trust that he'll equip me to do what he calls me to do. If he calls me to come, I can go. It says, Jesus said, come. And Peter got out of the boat. Again, it's just, you start thinking about what would this have been like even for the other disciples, and they're like, I can't believe he's doing it. This is we thought Peter was crazy. Peter's about dead. Peter gets out of the boat, steps onto the water, and he walks on the water and came towards Jesus. And you guys know the story. He ends up looking at the storm and looking at the waves, and he gets worried, and he starts sinking. And I love, I don't know if you ever thought about this, but Peter walked on water twice, at least somewhat. First time was on the way out. He walked on water for a little ways, and he started sinking. And then he cries out to God, and he reaches up his arm, and Jesus grabs him, and it says they get back in the boat. So I can only imagine that Jesus took Peter's hand, and they walked back together, which is still cool. I mean, I love that he's trusting Jesus, then he loses faith, then he trusts Jesus again. It's just a little bit more desperate because he's sinking. But I think there's something so powerful about what happens here and about what Peter says. Basically, if you tell me to come, I'll go. If you're giving the command, I'll trust you're going to equip me to do what you call me to do. I'll step in. Again, I think of Isaiah. Who will go for me? Whom shall I send? And I can't help that Isaiah's thinking, if God's asking to send me, if this question is directed at me to lead me, and he's saying, who shall I send? And if he's actually willing to send me, then I'm going to trust that he can do what he wants to do through me. And you see Isaiah take that step of faith. You see Peter take that step of faith, that action step. Oh man, so many places I'd love to go. I think of a number of times in my life where I've felt like I'm on the edge. I'm on the edge. And I'm scared. And I'd love to say that most of the times I step in. But if I'm honest with myself, to be honest, probably most of the times I'm not even paying attention. Most of the times when those doors are open to the plane, to step into what God has for me, I'm actually doing something else and I'm not even seeing that there's, an opportunity. But there are those times when I'm thinking about it and I see, and I feel like, okay, this is a chance, this is an opportunity to live into this life that's so exciting that I talk about, that I'm like, man, this changes everything. But I don't know how it's going to work out. I don't know, does God really want me to do it? Is it me or is it him? Or is it, and that's like life, right? Maybe some of you guys always know when this is definitely God and this was definitely me. Most of the time I'm like, I don't quite know. Unless it's in Scripture, and there's some things in Scripture we can know, he's told us to do this. We know it's true. We know this is God. But there's a lot of life things where you're like, I don't know if this is God or if this is me or if I'm supposed to step or if I'm supposed to pull back. And way more times than I'd like to admit, I pull back not because God tells me, yeah, that's not what you want me to do. But more often because I don't trust him. I don't rely on him. I can get so caught up in what's wrong, what's right. Is this the right step? Is this the wrong step? It goes back to what we talked about with Israel going into the promised land. They were kind of caught up into this idea of the goal. Should we go in? No, those guys are, big and scary and tall. And then God kind of disciplines them. And they're like, oh, now we are going in. And they're confident and they're bold. And God's like, you missed it both times. I brought you out of Egypt to bring you to myself. And I think sometimes I have to say, Dan, just give yourself a break. I'm trying to figure out, is this God? Is this not God? and I can stress myself out. And I think sometimes God's saying, you know what? For now, just focus on me. Maybe step in, trusting that I can direct you, I can lead you, I can show you. And those are scary moments. And I think there is a wisdom to not kind of throw all caution to the wind and be like, I'm going to do everything. I'm going to jump out into the road because somebody might stop and I might be able to tell them about Christ. You might get run over. There's wisdom in there, but there's these times when you're like, God, what are you calling me to do? I don't know. This seems right. This seems good, but I'm not sure. And we're called to say, God, you brought me to yourself. I believe you live in me. And sometimes there's that prayer, Lord, just call me to come. Tell me to come. And there's sometimes that step of I'm going to take a step and I'm going to be listening. I'm going to be listening. We had a property next to Timberline that we had considered for a long time. We'd seen it, Timberline is a small place. We were kind of expanding beyond our space, and we knew that at some point we're going to need to expand the buildings. And so there's this property next door. It was a ranch, 85 acres, and the owners of the ranch decided to sell it. And we'd been processing through, hey, it'd be great to have some space to expand, to grow the ministry. And as we heard this ranch coming up for sale, it just seemed to make a lot of sense to pursue buying this ranch. It was for sale for $1.5 million. We didn't have any money. I'm not a fundraiser. I don't know. We've done a couple fundraising projects, but I'm like, $1.5 million. For me, that was a lot of money. Some people, that's not a lot of money. For me, that's a lot of money. And I remember just asking God, God, do you want us to do this? Do you want us to try to raise money for this property? For me, it takes 2 years to make these decisions because, I second guess myself in every single moment. And some of that's good. Some of that is Lord, I don't want to I want to be wise. I want to be a good steward. I want to, but there was this moment where I was like, Dan, what has God called us to? What has he said come? What do you know he said come? And I'm like, I know we've been called to share Christ with young people and with families and with youth groups and with students. I know we're called to proclaim. Are you seeing God's blessing on the ministry presently? Yes, lives are being changed. It's so encouraging, And so I kept kind of asking myself these questions, and it was do you see for the next 20 years it working well in the space that you have? If you do nothing, how's that going to be? And I'm like, well, if I'm going to use my mind, I'm going to say that's not going to work well. We already have old buildings, and they're going to get worse, and they're, and so I was just processing through this, and I'm like, Lord, I think you're asking me to step out. Scary. And it wasn't a sign from heaven saying, Dan, buy the ranch. It was me saying, Lord, I know what you've called us to do as a ministry as a whole, and this seems like a right and logical next step. And so I'm going to step in. And a lot of people told us, hey, you should take out a loan, that's how you do these things. And we just felt, as we processed as a board, we just felt you know what? If we don't know 100% this is what God wants us to do, and so at least in this situation, we'd rather say we're not going to take out a loan. We're going to leave that barrier in front of us. If the Lord provides the money, then that'll be part of the kind of affirmation that we should do this. If the Lord doesn't provide the money, then we're going to take that as the nope, it's not the right decision. And I'll tell you, it was scary. Because what it meant was we had about 2.5 months to raise $1.5 million. That's what the owner said. He said he'd take it off the market for 2.5 months. We had June, we had July, we had half of August. I was like, oh man, it's a lot of time. Or not a lot of time, a lot of money. But I know how to do math. I'm like, okay, 1.5 million, that means if we could raise $500,000 in June, $500,000 in July, and $500,000 in the 15 days of August that we have, we'd have 1.5 million. And I'm like, that math's pretty easy. I don't know how to get those $500,000, but at least the math works. And I remember stepping out into this journey. Started with making a bunch of printed materials. And I remember the first time I was working on it with Sam, and we were brainstorming, and we put this stuff together, and kind of investing in a nice kind of printed material thing that told people what we're going to do. And I remember I had it on a computer, and it was such a sweet story. I was just thinking about this while I was sitting there. I'm flying to Quebec And I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm scared. I don't know if we should really do this, Lord, but I feel like it's a right first step, and we see what you do. And I'm flying to Quebec, and I'm sitting on the plane. There's me, there's somebody here, and there's another guy over there by the window. And I'm looking at it, and I can't remember how it came up, but the guy on the window side asked me a question about the brochure that I was looking at on my computer. And I told him, well, he thought we were a lumber company because there was like a big tree thing on there. He's like, are you a lumber company? Talking over this guy in between us. I'm like, no, we're a ministry. I explained it to him. I said, actually, and what I've been thinking is like, I wonder if this is like makes sense. And so I said, hey, can I do something with you? This is kind of weird. And the guy's like, yeah. I'm like, can I just hand you my computer? And you look at this, and I'm going to give you, I think I said I'm going to give you 30 seconds. The first time, just 30 seconds. I want to hand it to you for 30 seconds, and I'm going to take it back, and you tell me what you think about it. Because I want to know, okay, 30-second check, what are they going to get? So I hand it to him, 30 seconds, he hands it back. That's when he said, are you a lumber company? I'm like, no. Okay, so the 30 seconds didn't work. So I said, okay, now I'm going to give it to you for 3 minutes. I want you to read it, look at it, and then hand it back to me and tell you what's going on. What are we doing? So I handed it to him. He looked at it for 3 minutes, and he said, okay, it sounds like you're a ministry. You're looking for property. So we started talking about this, and actually had a really amazing conversation across this other guy. It's kind of funny. This guy's like these two people are having this conversation, handing computers back and forth, and this guy's name is Joe, and we have this really sweet conversation about him and his son, and their marriage had kind of been broken up, and he was trying to figure out how to raise this son, and he'd come from, I think it was a Catholic background, but it didn't sound like he had a real vibrant faith at all, but was very interested, and it was awesome. And I remember getting home, and it was like 2 weeks later, I got the very first check in the mail that came for our campaign. We hadn't even started the campaign, was from Joe, $2,500. I don't even know the guy. Met him on the plane. Not even really met him, he just looked at my thing. $2,500. I mentioned that because it came to my mind because he wrote me a letter this Christmas. That was 5 years ago. This Christmas, he wrote me a letter, picture of his son skiing, saying, hey, Dan, just thinking about you. How are you doing? What's going on? And I'm like, I need to write that guy back. Well, we started raising money. We started traveling around. Month one, we hit our 500,000. I was like, no way, that's crazy. Month one, 500,000. It's like, wow. And I started thinking, hey, I think this is doable. We had to give some money down at that point, $20,000 that we wouldn't get back if we didn't finish. And we went into month two. A lot of people excited about it. A lot of people we were talking to about the campaign, oh, this sounds really good and all this stuff. About 120,000. So here I get to the end of July. Now I'm at the end of July, and we've got about $620,000, which is a lot of money. Like it's a lot of money, but it's not 1.5 million. It's not 1.5 million. And at the end of July, we had to give another $25,000 down, plus pay another $10,000 for a huge survey of the property. And so that's going to cut away from what we have there. And I was like, man, do we just pull out at this point? I mean, if we pull out now, all we lose is $20,000. Or do we keep going? And I had a donor who said, hey, I want to give you $50,000 so you don't pull out. Like, okay, we might lose it all. And I remember we stepped into August, 15 days. We needed almost $1 million after all the expenses and some other things that we'd had to pay. We stepped into August, 15 days in August, and a little bit came in here and there, had some great conversations. We got down to the last week. I think we had 4 days left. And I was like, well, it's probably not going to happen. I went over to the owner of the ranch's house, and I told him, we owe, we're like $900-something thousand short. And I said, I've asked everybody I know. It's probably not going to happen. This guy was actually a Mormon, and he was upset. And I said, you know what, I'm trusting that if the Lord's going to bring it in, he's going to bring it in. And we had this great conversation, actually. He was pretty upset, and he said, he gave me this whole spiel about there's faith and then there's real life. And I was like, yeah, okay, there's our difference there. Well, he was upset. He was angry. He kind of kicked me out of his house at the end of the night, and I remember going home and went to bed. And I had, over this time, man, I had some weepy moments. A little side note. I never liked the Psalms. It's not like I didn't like them. I just didn't really I thought the Psalms are kind of like boring. Some of you guys are like, really? The Psalms are awesome. I never liked the Psalms until I was in that position. While I was raising that money, the Psalms came so alive because I felt so desperate and so embarrassed for things not to work out. And every psalm just seemed to speak right to my heart. And I realized that the reason, I think the Psalms are meant to be read in the midst of the pain and hardness of life. Because there's this kind of struggle and turmoil and then, joy in the Lord. Anyway, side point. So here I am. I go home. I wake up the next morning and I tell my wife, I say, Sarah, I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen. We have we're $1 million away and we are, 3 days or whatever it is left. And he said, you know what, it's okay. It's okay. It's embarrassing. We're going to have to send a bunch of money back to people. But we said, God, if you want us to do it, we took this step out, and I don't even think it was wrong, because when I look at that time, even that journey with the Psalms, it's like I had come closer to the Lord. Like, even if we didn't end up raising the money, I felt like I had found him. Like that, I saved you out of Egypt to find me. Not the promised land is extra, is bonus. That's where I'm taking you, but the purpose is me. And I found him. And I'm like, maybe that's the whole purpose, is that I would just be closer to Jesus. And I remember I tell my wife, I don't think it's going to happen. We owe $1 million. Not owe, thankfully. We are short $1 million. And I kind of put my Bible down. I was reading, we prayed or something like that. And all of a sudden, I got a text on my phone. And it was a guy that actually I felt like we'd offended earlier in the campaign, and I won't go into that story, but he texted me and said, hey, I just want you to know, we'd like to give you $10,000 right now and $10,000, in a few months or whatever. And to be honest, I was so kind of bent out of shape and hurt that I thought we offended him in the campaign that I was overjoyed that he had said. It was really a joyful text. I was like, that's awesome. I mean, it's not $1 million. It's $20,000, which is a lot of money, but it's nowhere near $1 million. But man, praise the Lord, that relationship seems to be mended. That's awesome. About 3 or 4 minutes later, I get a phone call. I pick it up. It's the owner of the property, and he says, hey, Dan, my wife and I were talking, and we want to drop the property price by $100,000. I'm like, okay, that's a little bit bigger chunk. So after that, he hung up. A friend of ours had said, or a guy we had met, he said, hey, I'd be interested in investing and donating to this cause. But he was kind of a property guy, and he's like, if the property was a little lower, I'd love to be involved. If the cost was a little lower. And so I called him up, and I said, hey, the owner just called and said they dropped the price by $100,000. He said, well, I was hoping more like $150,000, $200,000 lower, but I'll do it. I'll give you $200,000. That's $320,000 that morning. He calls back a few minutes later, and he said, hey, I talked to my CPA, and actually for our taxes, it'd be better if I gave you $400,000. I'm like, who does that, right? This is crazy. So now we're at $520,000. And so my wife is online. Some of you guys were a part of this journey. My wife's online tapping things into the computer, and she couldn't keep up because as she was putting things in, people started giving, and it was coming. By the end of the night, we needed $37,000. I was I remember the board called, and I'm like, we're almost there. We have nothing. We're $37,000, piece of cake. I'm like, when is $37,000 a piece of cake? When you need $1 million that morning. And I went to bed by the morning, hardly any time, and it was all paid off, and money kept coming in. I was praise the Lord. And it was crazy. What the sweetest thing, though, was that as we were celebrating that as a staff, the new Bible school year was coming in, getting ready. And that was Josh's crew, Josh's year. Where's Josh? Yeah, that was Josh's year. And the new Bible school year was coming in, and on this ranch property, there's a bunch of horses that were boarding the land. And so we were going to be able to, make some money off the horse boarding, but we didn't have any hay for them. We're heading into the winter, we have no hay, and we're we don't even know where to get hay. And so we got together as a staff, and we said, hey, if the Lord can provide $1 million, in 2 days, I'm sure he can figure out hay. So we prayed. And that next day, we went to church, and actually, we met a guy at church, and he said, hey, you need hay? Hey, you need hay? He said, you need hay? I've got hay. All it'll cost you, I'll give you the hay for free. You just need to pay for the trucking, the shipping to get it out, the trucking to get it out. Like, no way, thank you. It was a little bit after that, these students came, and we knew there was 3 German students that were having a hard time getting visas into the United States. They'd already tried like 2 times, and it wasn't good. The attorneys said, "Don't try again. You may be barred from the country if you keep trying." And these German students, they were like, "No, we're gonna try again." And we're like, "Please, you shouldn't. Like, you really shouldn't." And again, I remember coming together and saying, if the Lord can provide $1 million in 2 days, if the Lord can provide hay, the Lord could get these Germans into America, you know? And I don't know, Josh, if you remember this. I think we were on Mount Ida when the last, or on a hike or something like that, Byers or something like that, when the last one came in. But we got this phone call that all 3 Germans, on their 3rd visit, I think it was their 3rd visit to the embassy or whatever, got in. And it never happens. Like, praise the Lord. And then we needed, do this outdoor programming with kayaks. And we were getting ready. It was like 3 days away, this kayaking trip. And we'd heard that the company we borrow kayaks from, we usually got like 10 kayaks from these guys. Their insurance company says, yeah, we can't loan you kayaks anymore. And this was like 3 days before the trip. And we're like, oh man, what are we going to do? And I remember our program guy, Pete, he said, hey, if the Lord can provide $1 million in 2 days and hay when we need it and get these Germans into the country, he can provide kayaks. And it was actually just such a cool thing because there was this like kind of atmosphere of expectation. We all knew it might not happen. It wasn't like, oh, we got the magic wand now, but there was just this atmosphere of expectation that God can do it. So let's ask. And if he doesn't, that's okay. But we might as well ask because we know he can. And we asked like, okay, Lord, kayaks. The students, one of those first weekends, we have them all go to one of our churches, and they have tables like this after the service, and everybody eats at tables, and there's people from the congregation at tables to kind of meet our students and that sort of thing. The students knew we needed kayaks, and they started having conversations, and by the end of the dinner, almost every table had somebody who owned a kayak that said they'd be happy. One guy was like, oh, my neighbor, I don't have a kayak, but my neighbor has like 3, you know? They were hanging on the side of his barn. I can ask him if we can use them. And we had our 10 kayaks by the end of the meal. My favorite one, and this was all like just sequentially, it was amazing. There was we do faith stories, testimonies, and I remember 2 of our staff were sharing their testimony. And they were sharing about their coming to know the Lord. And they said, you know, both of them, their big focus was, here's when I came to know it. They do the day, you know, the time or whatever, the year that they came to know Jesus. And they were just talking about how significant that was. And we had, one of our staff girls was in the back, and she was just kind of sitting back there listening quietly. And she's like, I wish I knew when I came to know Jesus. I know I'm a Christian. But I wish I knew the day and the year that it happened, because that sounds, you know, the day, the month, the year, that's so cool to be able to say, this is when I went from death to life, from darkness to light, you know. And in her heart, just by herself, she said, Lord, if you can provide $1 million in 2 days, if you can provide hay, if you can get these Germans in the country, if you can provide us kayaks, like, this is a really stupid prayer request, but would you be willing to let me know when I came to know Jesus? I mean, who would ask that? She didn't ask it out loud. Later that day, she gets a video text. You know, like somebody makes a video and then texts it. She gets a video text from an old youth pastor who she hadn't connected with in a long time. And on this video text, it was the youth pastor saying, you know, hey, I hope you're doing well. Sorry we haven't talked in a long time, but I was just reminded of you. And he was at a camp. And he takes the camera and he shows like the underside of a bunk bed or the side of a bunk bed. And in pen up there was like a heart, and it said, her name was Bryn. Bryn came to know Jesus, and it was the day, the month, and the year. She just broke down. She came to staff meeting the next morning and told us, and we're like, no way. She showed us the video. Like, what? I tell you those stories not because it's like, guys, come on, miracles happen every moment. Like, the reality is, a lot of things I pray for don't happen. A lot of things you pray for don't happen. A lot of things we anticipate, this is how God's gonna work. It doesn't happen that way. But it doesn't mean it's wrong. In fact, sometimes it's the hardest things that God's doing something with, and we look back and we say, wow, I would have never wanted you to do that, but thank you because that brought me here. That did this. But the reality is we do have a God. We do have a God who's alive and active. The Christian life does not stop at the cross where he died for our sins and now we just get to hang out on our way to heaven. That is not the Christian life. The Christian life is he died for our sins so that his very life could live in us, to work through us. For guys like Joe that I met on the plane that I'm like, man, how come I haven't stayed? You know, he's pursuing me. I'm like, how come I haven't stayed more in touch with this guy Joe on the airplane? He's writing me. I'm like, I better write him back. I remember hearing my grandpa tell stories of like meeting people on the plane and like they come to know Christ years later and all this stuff. And I think, man, why do stories like that not happen to me? And then here I am 5 years later, and I mean, Joe and I kept in touch for a couple years. I didn't keep in touch with him. I didn't reach out and say, Joe, how are you doing? We talked about these spiritual things. Joe's reaching out to me. I'm like, Dan, come on. It's like God's like, hey, let me give you like a little, what do you call that? Like wiffle ball, like a T-ball. Let me tee this one up for you. Because you're not doing anything. And I wonder how many opportunities we miss because we either are standing on the edge of that plane and we're not willing to step out, or we're kind of just doing something else and we're just kind of forgetting and not listening, maybe as he's nudging and urging and doing things. When I got that letter from Joe, that was around Christmas, I said, I need to write that guy. I haven't written him yet. I better do it. Here we are halfway through January. How tragic if it goes the whole year and then you're kind of embarrassed to write him back. Man, I felt that urge. I think it was, was that the Holy Spirit? I don't know, maybe. Step in. I better write Joe because who knows what God's doing. I don't know what it is for you. I love, as I look at this, we'll finish up with this. As I look at Isaiah, in Isaiah 6, he has this experience. His lips are cleansed. He's been made wholly blameless, beyond reproach or whatever. His iniquities taken away, his sins forgiven. God says, whom shall I send? Who will go for us? And here he is on the edge of the plane, and he steps in. He says, send me, I'm in. And you're kind of like, oh man, what's going to happen? This is going to be awesome. And he's like, okay, what am I going to tell? What am I going to say? You're going to send me? God says, go and tell this people, keep on listening, but do not perceive. Keep on looking, but don't understand. Render the hearts of this people insensitive, their ears dull, their eyes dim. Otherwise they might see with their eyes and hear with their ears and understand with their hearts and return and be healed. Verse 11, then I said, Lord, for how long? How long should I give this message that's just going to quiet? Like they're not going to listen. And he says, give this message until the cities are devastated and without inhabitant. Houses are without people and the land is utterly desolate. The Lord has removed men far away, and the forsaken places are many in the midst of the land. Yet there will be a 10th portion in it, and it will again be subject to burning, like a terebinth tree or an oak whose stump remains when it is felled. The holy seed is its stump. He gives this message. He's like, Isaiah, this is going to be your ministry. Nobody's going to listen. You're going to keep telling them. They're going to ignore you. But how long? How long until things like turn around and I get to see like the good stuff? It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And I can't imagine Isaiah had to have this moment of saying, okay, am I about the goal or am I about the giver of the goal? Is it about God or is it about me? Because if it's about the goal, like I want to be used, I want God to use me, I want to see fireworks, and I'm so blessed to have this experience, this year with the hay and the kayaks and all those things. That was awesome, but there's a lot of times that aren't like that. Am I okay? Just be the obedient one. Say, send me. I'll step out of this airplane, and I hope the parachute opens. But like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they say if we go into that fire, even if we're not saved, even if we die there, we'll still worship God. I think of Stephen. Stephen, he stepped in big time. Stoned for it. Looking up to heaven. He dies a bloody, painful death. Others, there was exciting days. Paul, man, some really sweet stuff. In the end, he gets killed. Sounds like, in Rome. Hard days. the challenge for us as we finish up this time, and the band's gonna play a song about send me. And you're not gonna sing, just listen. Almost have the song sung over you. I want you to process it and pray it and listen. And I want you to think about yourself on the edge of that, whatever that void is, whatever that area is, whatever God might be calling you to, and say, God, do you want me to take a step? Or maybe you know he's called you to something. Maybe it's something small. Maybe it's a text that you've been kind of like just not texting, and you're like, I know you want me to do this. Maybe it's something bigger that you think you're supposed to step into. Maybe it's an unknown, and you're like, I don't even know if I'm supposed to do this. And maybe he's asking you to take just a baby step and see what happens. Listening ears. But as you hear this, I want you to really ask yourself, am I willing to step in? Am I willing to have my life be the kind of life that says, God, I believe that I am not just a bucket of dry bones. I am not just a bones with body and meat on them, but actually the breath of life has been breathed back into my life. If you know Jesus. If you don't know Jesus, man, make that right today. Because it's the most incredible thing in the world. It's the only hope we have. But if you know Jesus, imagine yourself, as we sing this, sing it in your heart. Don't sing it out loud. Say to the Lord, Lord, I want you to send me. Or maybe you say, I want you to send me. Wherever you are. Let's worship the Lord together as we wrap up our time.
I can hear my Savior calling. Take up your cross and follow me. Let my heart move in sweet surrender. Oh, it's my joy to say yes to you. Send me, I'll go anywhere, yes, I'll go anywhere. Send me, I'll go anywhere, yes, I'll go anywhere. This is my prayer for every nation, to hear your name be lifted up, Lord, as your church and as your children. Oh, it's my joy to say yes to you. Send me, I'll go anywhere, yes, I'll go anywhere. Send me,
Would you guys stand to your feet? Would you join us in worship and singing? Just responding in this moment, thanking our God for who He is. You sing this. Oh, my words fall short. I've got nothing new. How could I express all my gratitude? I could sing these songs as I often do, but every song was sang and you never do. So I throw up my hands, praise you again and again, 'cause all that I have is a hallelujah, hallelujah. And I know it's not much, but I've nothing else fit for a king except for a heart singing hallelujah, hallelujah. I've got one response. I've got just one move. With my arms stretched wide, I will worship you. So I throw up my hands and praise you again and again, 'cause all that I have is a hallelujah, hallelujah. And I know it's not much, I'm nothing else fit for a king except for a heart singing hallelujah, hallelujah. Just a hallelujah, Lord. Oh, we praise you with it, Jesus. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Oh, come on, my soul. Don't you get shy of me. Lift up your song. 'Cause you've got a lion inside of those lungs. Get up and praise the Lord. We sing it. Come on, my soul. Oh, don't you get shy of me. Lift up your song. 'Cause you've got a lion inside of those lungs. To get up and praise the Lord. Oh, come
Sweet. Lord, thank you, thank you, thank you. You are so good, Lord, beyond what we deserve. And yet in you, we claim your life, your victory, Lord, your value that you put on us. Lord, thank you. And I pray that as we go out of this place, this short weekend together, Lord, that we would go out as lights in a dark world. Lord, listening ears to hear who you have us talk to and who you have us connect with. Lord, who you have us serve and love and care. That we would show the power of God in the service of humility. Lord, we'd look at ourselves not as those who can't, but those who can because of you and only because of you. Lord, we'd step into the void of your life, which is not a void at all because it's your life and it's hope and it's everything we long for. And yet from our perspective, Lord, it can feel so scary. But I thank you that the key is that we're holding on to you. Lord, I pray that as we leave, you would be more and more the center of our hearts and our lives. Lord, we thank you for your grace and your mercy. Lord, we say hallelujah, praise you, lift you up, Lord, because you deserve it. In your name.